Hello, good morning everyone. Welcome to Sunrise Daily today. I'm Chamberlain Uso.
It's a beautiful Tuesday morning. I'm Kayode Okikelu.
I'm Ayomakile. Good morning and welcome to the program.
Well, work starts indeed today. Good morning. I'm Maokwe Ogunyuse from Abuja.
I thought there was work yesterday.
Oh, well, not for everyone.
Oh!
Not for everyone.
I mean, public holidays, not everyone's.
No, I can understand. I mean,
What kind of brother do, man?
Work.
I don't know what. Oh, yes, indeed. Yeah, so, it's another lovely, lovely day. So, we'll go ahead and take a look at how some of the dailies are reflecting certain items as they are playing themselves out. So, we've got quite a number of those dailies here this morning. But if you look at Nigerian Tribune, well, first look at that picture just on the front page right there. And wow, talking about catch them young or catching them young, you could see Master Ferdinand Maumo Makoko, 2021 class champion, with he's having a game with Lagos State Governor Mr. Babajide Sanwo-Olu during his visit to the governor at Lagos House Marina.
I'd like to know who won.
Well, let me just give you spoilers. Nobody won. Because the governor says he's a good chess player. The young man is an amazing chess player. So I think it was a back and forth for a while.
Wait a minute, those two words you used are quite instructive. One is a good one.
I didn't want to repeat the same word, so I thought to use a different word for the young man.
No, I mean, Chamberlain said catch them young. So in a way, it's like saying, okay, well, maybe...
Wait, so you expected the young man to have...
I didn't say anything.
To have defeated the governor in the game of chess.
After all, there is one day governor in Lagos, so, I mean...
Do you get to win by virtue of being either governor or one-day governor?
Exactly. You don't get to win because you're governor.
No, but you said there's one-day governor.
No, I mean, he said... That's not the point, Chamberlain, come on.
I know what you're trying to do. You're trying to get a point. You're trying to drive to a point, particularly.
I'm not driving at you. I'm just sitting down and talking.
It was a friendly match. It's not a competitive
Even
game.
in a friendly match, Nigeria defeated, Cameroon. So
well, the last one it was 0-0. So.
Yeah, but that was the second one. So who won?
Well. Interesting one right there. So, it's always good to see, lots of young folks getting their potentials out there, speaking about the future of the country. So, it's always encouraged. These are part of the things that make society tick, actually. So, we should encourage that a lot more whenever we can. All that said, take a look at what's on the lead story right there. Oof. Nigeria may not celebrate another Democracy Day, Shoyinka. And then you can see excerpts of part of why that headline is this morning. So it's your big lead right there. And then speaking of which, Nigeria needs leaders who will unite country. Shibajo. So there you go. That's what you see there. Right beside that, you see government reserves turning into hideouts for criminal herdsmen. Ekiti farmers cry out. So, I guess they'll have to notify the authorities as they're crying out. Perhaps they need to swing into action and see what they can do to sort that particular one out. And that is the Tribune this morning. Well, yeah, you could actually see what's on the top right-hand corner. 33 trillion naira debt unsustainable may plunge Nigeria into bankruptcy. PDP governors warned. So they had that meeting for several, about 2 or 3, who knows. But this happens to be the latest perspective from that meeting.
In fact, when you take a look at the front page of the Vanguard, you see a picture from that meeting right there on the front page. PDP Governors Forum meets in Uyo, and I can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 13 PDP governors right there in that picture. So take a look at the lead story, though. Nigeria on suicide slide, must decentralize fast, Shoyinka. So this is another angle to to that lead story on the front page of the Tribune. You see, warns Nigeria may not remain together if federal government fails to decentralize it. Notes Buhari's comment on open grazing unfortunate. That statement has caused quite a stir, and it's still causing quite a stir. And I think it just opens up another vista of debate and conversation, and just wonder, how will this be resolved? Adds Senate reps not doing enough, governors too timid. Twitter ban indicates FG is enemy of democracy. And presidency keeps mum. So as you can see, there's different angles to this, different things to pick out of this. But page 5 of the Vanguard newspaper this morning. In blue, right under the big picture, you see militants reply herdsmen vow to repel attacks on Delta. We retaliate any attack on Delta. That's coming from MEDND. South will resist attempts to deride open grazing ban.
I think that's actually an error. It's meant to be mend.
I thought so too, but I mean, so I think it's mend, as he pointed out. But you never know. You say South will resist attempts to deride open grazing ban. Clark. It's on page 12. I think there was a response from Yetiala on that one. But you see, that one, you find that on page 12 of the Vanguard newspaper. It's a lot of stories on the front page of the Vanguard for you this morning. You see, terminal operators to contribute to total reconstruction of Apapa Port, Amechi. So, I mean, if you're earning from there, it sounds like the minister is saying you also have to contribute to the betterment of where you're earning from. Mr. and Mrs. is on the front page, just something on a lighter note, really. You see, Mrs. telling Mr., your mother is coming to spend 3 weeks with us. So because of that, I can't enjoy my own husband anymore, eh? And you can see Mr. sort of appealing and trying to cajole her, saying, you can't call me baby while mother is here. End of story. So, back page has sports for you.
Oh dear.
Oh yes.
So nomenclature is going to change.
Oh yes. Let's just respect ourselves, okay? But that's Vanguard.
In other words, that baby is mommy's word, not wife's word. Well, I guess Mapa will respond to that in good time. But the Guardian newspaper this morning is also leading with what Shoyinka said. Nigeria on suicide slide may not see another June 12, Shoyinka warns. As the lead continues on the inside pages, urges President to stop exuding false confidence, listen to citizens, restructure the country. PDP governors decry FG's excessive borrowing, NNPC's opaque operations, wants Twitter ban reviewed in nation's interest. Of course, you see the picture from that PDP governors meeting as well. And right under that picture, inflation, devaluation push millennials away from 20 trillion naira stock market. More on that, why Generation Y are shunning stock market for Ponzi schemes, cryptocurrencies, betting.
I was waiting for crypto in that story, but there you go.
Okay. Let me know. Operators worry about losing market patronage on exit of older generations, and that really should be worrying. Yeah, because if the younger generation is not interested if they're not interested in the stock market, what happens when the older generation, those who are in it now, pass on? And I think it's a global phenomenon as well.
I remember the CBN saying that they have plans to launch a digital currency for Nigeria. So is that going to bridge that gap or find some transition of sorts? Because we need to start thinking of new ways to do these things, because this generation will not be here forever.
Look, it's already upon us. So I'm sure they should have seen this signs a long time ago.
Give it another 20 years from now, guys.
What?
Trust me.
Why wait 20? Okay.
No, we don't have to wait, but I'm saying that if they refuse to exit, they will be exited. I mean, it's just a matter of time. As the Guardian newspaper this morning.
Well, let me take the front page of Leadership for you this morning, and they have this one. 16 days after abduction, Islamia pupils fall sick. They have details on page 4 of the paper. So obviously, some people are keeping tabs on their whereabouts in the forest. They understand where they are, or either that, or they're keeping in touch with the parents who, of course, will be in touch with these abductors. Let's not forget that these were mere children. Yeah, they are. They're not where now. They still very much are, unless, of course, we want to forget them and make them where. They are children, mere children, some as tender as 4, 6, 8, and they're still in the forest 16 days after they haven't been released. That's the front page of Leadership for you this morning. Don't forget that just a few days ago, we celebrated Children's Day. Is this what we're living for the children? There are huge questions to be asked. 16 days after abduction, Islamia pupils fall sick. And let's not forget now, that right now the weather is not very friendly. I mean, parents know how they're taking their children to school with cardigans and all whatnot. These children are left in the forest sleeping on the bare floor. I don't know. Page 4 will give you all the details. Parents panic, raise funds through churches, mosques as bandits reduce ransom to 150 million naira. We won't pay ransom. Niger government insists. IDPs reject local government chairman's rice gift. When IDPs begin to refuse rice gift, it tells you that they too are not happy. But all the details are on page 4. It's a really heartbreaking read this morning. If you look on the front page, you also see some other stories. Governors meet over legislature, judiciary autonomy today. Nigeria won't break up despite challenges. That's from Gandu J. ISWAP frees UN staff, 9 others after 5 months. Tour operators lament cancellation of 2021 Hajj. That's also there. And of course, this 18 killed in Anambra Plateau is also there. What's this story about? Oshibaja launches Dash Me Foundation. You might want to read details on page 9. Let's leave it there for Leadership newspapers.
Or take a look at Blueprint next. They do highlight some of what you might have seen in particularly that previous paper. So there you go. Take a look. After 5 month captivity, ISWAP frees UN staff, 9 others. UNICEF urges release of 150 abducted Tegina students. Gunmen kill 25 in Plateau, Benue communities. Zazao Emir raises concerns over attacks on Zaria. Convene security summit now. Pioneer NGFDG tells ex-governors. So you have all of that associated with that big lead story right there on the front page here today. But at the bottom strip, FG paid $642.43 million foreign debt in Q1 2021, ascribed to the DMO, Debt Management Office, alongside several other stories making the front page today. That's Blueprint, though.
Nigeria News Director's next with this story. FG unveils technology to tackle fuel tanker explosions. That's right. So it'll be interesting to see what this technology is about to tackle fuel tanker explosions. I mean, you know how rampant we've had these explosions and how deadly they are. I mean, talk about Lagos. There's a particular stretch of road that is notorious for fuel tanker explosions in Lagos, between Lagos and Ogun State. It will be good to see what this technology is about. That's a major story for the Nigerian News Direct today, and may I say it's actually a major one indeed. We see this one. Customers lament over 6 Naira 98 kobo USSD charges by banks and telcos. You know, the challenge for some people is they try to initiate the USSD, and you know, sometimes you get network issues or you get timeout, and they say they are still charged for a transaction that didn't even go through. So these are some of the challenges people have raised.
6 Naira 98 kobo, please. Always underscore that. 6 Naira 98 kobo every time you use USSD.
Wow. So
and for a limited number of seconds.
Oh, Is it not per session?
Is it per session or per second? They sound alike, so.
This was actually meant to solve a problem, really. But now that customers are lamenting, you wonder, who is it solving the problem for? The customers or the companies? This one is on page 14.
Because at the end of every ATM transaction, once you're done making a withdrawal, that's it. You have to go out to come back in if you have to. That seems to be what some people have experienced. Maybe it's the same thing here, because at the end of each session, that's just it. But then, does it even go through, especially in areas where network is not, and this is not talking about internet service network now, it's talking about even the, receiving the text messages and all of that.
Well,
I guess that's the job quota for NCC, wouldn't you say?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You said this one on judiciary legislative autonomy, governors to hold virtual meeting today. And may I just say, today being Tuesday, judiciary workers are meant to be back at work. I don't know what I meant to say. I'm excited, happy about that, really. Because it's been how many months? 2-3 months since that strike has been on. So personally, I'm excited about that. It might not be on the front pages, but
you know what's also interesting. The number of people that have been jobless since Johnson was on strike. Those people that help to make photocopies, pictures, passport pictures around the court all over the country. They've been out of work, affidavits and all. They've been out of work.
And talk about the judiciary itself. I mean, people trying to get justice.
The lawyers, please. Underscore that.
Well, it's I mean, there's lawyers, there's a people. So you can tell why I'm excited. There are a couple of other stories. G7 development finance institutions, others to invest $80 billion into African businesses. Question is your business positioned to receive such investment? Think about it. That's the Nigerian News Direct.
Well, maybe the editors of both the Nigerian News Direct and the Daily Times shared or compared notes this morning, because that G7 and others to invest $80 billion in African businesses is also on the front page of the Daily Times. But the main story on the front page of the Daily Times newspaper this morning, governors allege impunity at CBN, NNPC, NIMASA, others. The picture you see there, the pictures are that of the chairman of the Governors Forum and the CBN governor. Well, some would say that's one governor beside another governor, but it's right there on the front page. It leads you to page 2, where you have all the details on the inside pages. And right under that one, tax. Nigeria loses over 100 billion naira yearly in tax-related frauds. What does that mean? The details you'll find on page 5 of the paper this morning. Power, NNPC, EGME collaborates to boost gas-to-power program. So on page 4, and so many other stories you'll find interesting. Markwe?
Well, let's look at the Daily Trust for you. They have this one. We're at the mercy of kidnappers. Emir of Zuzul cries out. 30 killed in Benue, Plateau, Niger. I think we almost must put in context the fact that there's a people. When we see 30, the figures are human beings. You find details continuing on page 5 of the paper. It's becoming very, very frequent to just see these figures on the front pages, and let's imagine we're talking numbers, but they're human beings. Let's look at this one. The picture's there, worth 1,000 words, and it would seem that there is some controversy around that story. Military gunships kill. The kill there is in parentheses. Over 1,000 cows in Nasarawa, herders, farmers in disarray, soldiers aware of Buhari's shoot-on-sight order, that's according to Otom, no persons, animals killed. That's according to the Nigerian Air Force. So I guess this picture is to dispel or to, I don't know, maybe to disprove that. But you'll find details on page 4, because they also put that kill in parentheses. But so far, Daily Trust has always tried to report both sides and sometimes the other side. Look at this. Forex scarcity, airlines worried as operational costs rises. Page 17 is where you see details. How Fani Kayode linked me up with Nnamdi Kanu from Asari Dokubo, and a number of other stories at the bottom. Yesterday was Blood Donors Day. I heard you guys talking about that yesterday. Saving lives. What to know about blood donation, just in case you'd like to give blood and save a life. So they have some information for you on what you need to know as a potential blood donor. But it's definitely a very honorable thing to do. Let's leave it there for Daily Trust.
Okay, take a look at Daily Times then. Okay. All right, so that's already gone. All right, so there you go.
The thing that, Marco just mentioned about the blood donor thing. You remember when we took that story yesterday, talked about unsafe blood.
Yeah.
And I think it is something of concern. One should really even understand what it means. What does unsafe blood mean?
And add to that the fact that Nigeria only gets about 27% of the blood it needs.
And our demand is far outweighs that.
Absolutely.
A lot.
We need in millions.
And look at the security situation. I mean, people are shot, sadly, and they're rushed to the hospital. They need blood. So it's a lot. So you can do that. I mean, maybe once every 3 months you can donate blood and help the nation, help the country keep beating, as it were.
All right, we'll still have New Telegraph, Mapa. Go ahead.
Well, let's quickly take a look at this one. Insecurity, Buhari's administration overwhelmed. That's according to Northern Can. Threats of a looming food crisis. Don't forget that yesterday on the front pages of one of the dailies, we saw that food prices are soaring. And if I may, just on my Instagram over the weekend, I mean, a few people whom I follow, they were lamenting as to what the market prices for food, common food items, are currently saying. Whew. President alone has coercive security instrument, opposition governors. Buhari not listening to Nigerians. That's from Shoyinka. So it will seem that he's been quoted extensively in today's papers, different strokes for different folks. The part interesting to New Telegraph is Buhari not listening to Nigerians, attributed to the Nobel laureate. And if you see at the bottom there, presidency, Twitter ban persists due to secessionist agitations. ECOWAS court hears Serap, Nigeria's suit against federal government. Government can make $50 billion yearly from Twitter regulation. That's according to Ned Nwoko. Looks like the senator is he's backing the federal government, and maybe he has ideas as to how to do that. You find also on top of the nameplate, FX squeeze, investors cancel new trucks, parts orders, as manufacturers groan over unsold inventories. Expect more bad trucks on Nigerian roads. That's according to industrialists. That's because there is a foreign exchange squeeze. So it looks like we do not have spare parts. Page 5 will give you all the details. All prices rise to over 2-year high as demand improves. So who knows? Maybe that's those stories are together because one will have an effect on the other. If all prices rise, maybe we can hope to see an improvement in our foreign exchange supply. Who knows? But you might want to read all the details on page 5. Of course, don't forget that picture there. PDP governors meeting. It was same in Akwa Ibom, and they're releasing their communique. And I'm sure they will have details inside the paper for you. Let's leave it there for New Telegraph. We're talking about a fine young lady here in Abuja who's doing a fantastic job, advocating and telling people what to do about blood donation. Maybe sometime we'll bring her to you here on the show to let us know what we need to know about blood donation, but it's definitely a very noble thing to do. Interestingly, I have not been able to donate blood ever. Have you, gentlemen?
Chamberlain, you're the team.
Well, they're not answering.
This is a moment of truth. Well, yes, a
They
few
only can laugh
times,
about it.
really. But we need to
A few
do more.
times over.
Yeah.
That's your answer then. All right, so we're back in a moment. Don't go away. All right, welcome back. Yes, there you go. That is who will be hosting this morning, Mr. Abdullahi Bawa, the chairman of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, the EFCC. Good morning, and thank you for joining us today on the program. Well, yeah, I know you know that there's so much expectations from your office, by extension yourself. So, in the light of all of those considerations and how are you settling into this office at the moment?
Good morning. Thank you very much for having me this morning. Well, I'm settling in very well. Things are going on as expected.
You get from people when they say, well, we don't exactly know what to expect from Mr. Bauer, but let's watch and see. Do you get that kind of impression?
Well, certainly we have set out what we intend to do. We have told Nigerians the kind of EFCC they should expect under my watch, and we are working towards that day and night.
And then speaking about fighting corruption, I mean, here, you know, the different meanings, different interpretations that people give to it, how they think it should be approached, how we're perceived globally, what needs to be done to change. So you've spoken about your plan separately, severally. So if you could shed some light, how do you intend to achieve or carry out your own activities with a view to changing or achieving the fight against corruption is successful?
Well, to start with, the provisions of the law is very clear. One cannot go beyond the law itself. You have the EFCC Establishment Act that gives us our mandate. So, of course, we are going to achieve the fight against corruption through the mandate that is given to the Commission by the provisions of the Act. You have the Administration of Criminal Justice Act that is the procedural law that guides on what to do in terms of arrests, in terms of searches, etc., etc. And then you have, of course, other issues that has to do with, prosecution of cases. So by and large, issues of fighting corruption has to do with prevention, has to do with law enforcement and asset recovery. And that is exactly what we are working towards. We have mentioned it time and time again that we have realized the difference between fighting corruption and fighting corrupt people. And that fighting corruption is actually issues that has to do with good governance, issues that has to do with institutional reforms, issues that has to do with doing things, by the book, by the procurement processes, etc., etc. And that is what we tend to work towards, to push and advise the government towards strengthening processes and procedures to prevent corruption from happening, because it is far more cheaper to prevent than to actually enforce the laws after the commissioning of the offense. But it's all things that has to be done together. You know, the law enforcement, the prevention, etc., etc. We're working tirelessly towards achieving the two issues.
Talking about prevention of corruption, there are those who feel that perhaps one way to go about it would be the audit law. So I'm wondering if that, or the absence of that, is an inhibition to fulfilling your mandate. Because I remember you recently said to a committee of the National Assembly that the EFCC found 1 billion naira sitting royally and regally in the account of one civil servant. And if you look at the Auditor General's reports over the years, 2014 till maybe 2018, you'll find a lot of indictments of ministries, departments, and agencies with so much money hidden away here and there, and so many people supposed to take action and they haven't taken the action. So I'm wondering, in terms of prevention and in terms of even taking on those issues, especially from those indictments in the Auditor General's reports over the years, is there anything the EFCC can do?
Well, if you look at, the public service rules, the provision of, brief for public, Public Procurement Act. If everybody is to go by those two documents itself, you understand, you will not have any problem. But people will always find a way of, trying to manipulate the system for their own selfish interest. Yes, of course, if those issues are there, then the EFCC will have little to do. But humans will always find a way of doing it the other way, and that is why we have to come in and do what we have to do. When it comes to, you raise the issue of the civil servant, etc. You see, there is no single kobo that can leave the government coffers without going through the procurement processes. And that is where you see a lot of the problems when it comes to the issue of public corruption. It is through the processes of the award of contract, whether or not the contract has been executed is another way of taking the money out. Now, whether, of course, the inflation of the contract is also another way of taking the money out. And then, of course, you have instances whereby, yes, the contract has been awarded, yes, the contract has been done to specification, but then, of course, there are briberies, kickbacks going back and forth. So, by and large, it's part of it. If we can have a very robust audit processes, then, of course, it will reduce to a larger extent the way we come into some of these issues to deal with them in terms of enforcing the laws of the land.
Do you see a gap in that process that you just talked about now that needs to be blocked, especially talking about the civil service? Because politicians come and go. Political appointees come and go, elected officials come and go, but civil servants are always there. The civil service is always there. And they are supposed to be the ones that continue to oil the engine of governance. So if the structures are not strong enough to prevent, to go by your recommendation, then there would be a problem and the EFCC will probably not even be able to sleep at all. So do you see gaps that need to be blocked? And if you agree, what are those gaps and what can be done?
There are a lot of gaps, gentlemen and ladies. There are a lot of gaps. Some of the gaps that we have seen or have identified, were put in the laws, with good intentions. For instance, when it comes to the issue of emergency contracts, for instance, whereby there is an issue and then the MDS can award this emergency contract. It is being abused by some certain agencies. There's a particular agency that is notorious for that. They have turned all their contracts into emergency contracts because they don't want to go through the process of bidding, et cetera, et cetera. So there are gaps. And most of the issues out there is because the laws are not even being put to use. And that is why in the EFCC, even though we have 95% rating in terms of our own procurement processes, when I came on board, we upgraded the procurement unit into a full-fledged department. And what we intend to do and achieve with that is to make the EFCC procurement department to be the living manifestation of all the procurement laws in this country, so that it can serve as a model for MDS to come and see how things are being done in terms of purchase of goods and services, engagement of consultants, et cetera, and it is there that the laws are there, the gaps are there, but then they have to be tested to be able to see where the red flags, to enable us to see where the red flags are, and then advise government appropriately to come and close those gaps.
But over time, especially, in this 110 days, thereabouts, that you've been in office, just how ahead of these activities have you been? Because it's one thing to fight corruption, as you said earlier, but it's another thing to prevent, always stay ahead. So just how much have you been maybe 10 steps ahead of those activities, either in the civil service, in fact, majorly in the civil service?
Do you want me to tell you our strategies on how far we are ahead of them? Certainly, we will not come to the media and say what we are doing in terms of how we will get them. But I want to assure you of the fact that we are doing a lot. One of the strategies that we are trying to renew and implement is to carry out what is called corruption risk assessment or fraud risk assessment on, some of these MDAs. For instance, I have written to the the Ministry of Petroleum Resources, and the minister have responded accordingly. We are very soon going to, commence the process of corruption risk assessment of all the, parastatals and agencies under the Ministry of Petroleum Resources to look at their vulnerability to fraud, to corruption, and then, of course, to advise them on how to mitigate against those risks of fraud and corruption. And I think that is the way to go. It is only when you have assessed yourself that how vulnerable are you to corruption and fraud that you can be able to now set up what is called a committee of fraud risk management, and to see where the residual risks are, and then where, of course, are you going to find a ways of dealing with them.
Right. Now, you have said that the tail end of every financial crime is having access to the fund. So we've talked about civil service, which it could be like the brain of some of these activities. But the tail end, as you have said, is having access through the banks, as it were. And I recall a few weeks back, you mentioned this, the enforcement of the policy to ensure that bankers declare their assets as at when due. Now, this caused quite a lot of debate. And I remember that the time frame you gave was June the 1st. Now, this is 2 weeks or thereabouts after that. Just first, how important was that, or is that, in the whole scheme of fighting corruption in Nigeria?
Well, it is important because fraud fighters across the world have agreed that the idea of humans to realize that they can be caught is the best form of deterrence. And I did not say that the banks should declare their assets to us. The law has been in existence since 1986. I was 6 years old when that law was passed. All that we said in the EFCC is that come 1st of June, we are going to demand for those declared assets by the bankers. We are going to demand, because by law, we have the powers to demand for information. And we have our reasons, for demanding for such information. And we have asked them to submit those records on that 1st of June. And I think this is my first day in office, and I believe that they have responded, or some of them have started responding to that, our request. We have our intentions for action, and then, of course, we know that we want to utilize those information to carry out 1 or 2 investigations against the bankers.
For a lot of people is, do you mean all bankers, or is it bankers at a certain level? Because they wonder just how would monitoring be? You would need perhaps vast human resource just to monitor if it were all bankers. So some sort of clarification, is there any restriction to who, there's a law, but how are you planning to handle this?
The law says that all the bankers should declare, but in the first instance, we demanded for the declaration of assets of the MDs, the deputy MDs, and the executive directors of all the banks. But we are strategizing, we are working. We have our own ways on how we want to utilize that information.
In terms of your mode of operation, there are some who say that when EFCC approaches the court for an ex parte, perhaps to investigate a property or something, so once that is granted, EFCC hangs on to that, even when that ex parte or the application has elapsed. So they thought that there's a challenge there that ought not to be. Are you aware of this, and what's the plan to see that things perhaps change?
Well, Chamberlain, I believe you are not a lawyer. I think your question is neither here nor there. There is what is called the non-conviction base for future, which we normally approach the court through Section 17 of the Advanced Fee Fraud and Other Related Offences Act 2006. And the provision of the law is very clear. When there is a property that's abandoned or is suspected to have been acquired by process of crime, the EFCC can approach the court ex parte, stating the facts, etc., as it were. And then, of course, in the first instance, interim forfeiture order is granted by the court. And the provision of that section, goes ahead to say that the court should order that interim forfeiture should be published for 14 days for anybody that has any interest on that property to come and show cause why that property should not be forfeited to the federal government of Nigeria. And after the 14 days, EFCC will now go back to the court and ask for the final forfeiture of that property. And that's what we have been doing. We have recovered hundreds of assets through this process. We have recovered billions of naira through this process, and there has not been any problem. If anybody is having any issue, of course, we have instances whereby people are challenging us in court, and then of course the court is deciding, one way or another. The recent one is the former Senate President properties, where the court said that it will not grant the final forfeiture order. And then, of course, we are going back to court to see how we will push our own case towards that. So there is no problem here. There is no ambiguity here, Chamberlain. If we are a civil organization, we are a penal institution that respect the rule of law, we approach the court. If there is any problem, we solve it through the court processes. So I don't see the problem that you are mentioning here.
Okay, let me ask you this. Does the scope of corruption in Nigeria overwhelm you?
Yes and no. Yes, because...
Please, a little more light on that. You say yes and no.
Yes, because if you look at it, Modipe, almost everywhere, there are elements of it going place. No, because I'm optimistic that we will succeed in taming the monster of corruption in this country. So I'm very optimistic that with the efforts of the government, you remember one of the cardinal principles of the president's administration is to fight corruption. And we in the EFCC and other law enforcement agencies saddled with this responsibility, we are doing our best trying to see that we curtail this. But then, of course, if you look at what is happening, across the length and breadth of this country, we begin to wonder, what is wrong with us. But then, of course, Nigeria is a very religious country, and that is why one of the issues that we realize in terms of public enlightenment is to engage with the religious body. Very soon, we are going to relaunch our interfaith dialogue with the Christian community, with the Islamic community to, engage them on the ills of corruption. We have already developed manuals in that regard long ago. We are reviewing them already, and then of course we want to launch them and see how we can. We believe that going through that process will help in a great deal of, taming the monster of corruption.
Now, looking at how widespread it is, looking at just the sheer scope, yes, indeed, you already have what they call that now. The name of your commission already, streamlines what sort of corruption you're looking at. Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, that's the name of your organization. I'm wondering, what areas of economic and financial crime are you narrowing down on, which you consider will be the most effective in stemming the tide of corruption?
Well, when it comes to generally, by and large, is to deal with the issue of the utilization of the funds, whether it's a private sector corruption, whether it is public sector corruption. You look at avenues in which they are laundering these proceeds of crime, and that is very important. If you look at the provision of the criminal code, for instance, and the rationale behind that, if you are charged to court and a conviction is cured on somebody that is charged with stealing, it's 7 years imprisonment. But receiving stolen goods, if charged and convicted, you'll be given 14 years. Because without those that are receiving the stolen goods, the thief will not steal. So we are looking towards, dealing with this, what we call the gatekeepers, in money laundering, to deal with them, to ensure that we have a very rigorous and effective, control over them. Because we believe that once we get that straight, those that are stealing will find it very difficult to even steal because, of course, they will begin to think, how are they going to even launder the process of crime? And that is the area where we are working with the National Assembly to ensure that we have the requisite laws to enable us to, achieve that. And of course, that we have the Special Control Unit against money laundering domicile in the EFCC, and we are partnering, of course, with the Ministry of Industries in that regard. And I think that is the way to go, because one of the problems that we have here now in this country is the real estate. 90 to 100% of resources are being laundered through the real estate. But they are, of course, they are being regulated by the Lands Bureau, but it's not enough in terms of how they make their returns to the Special Control Unit against money laundering. There are a lot of issues there that we can talk all day about. But I think, to me, that is one area where if we get it right, we find it very, you will tend to see that it will not be fashionable for you to have this grand scale corruption. And we will tend to see it easing out with time, God willing.
I totally understand, I mean, your challenges there, because I imagine that someone can easily get cash and, a property can be developed top to bottom and there will be no interface with registered institutions. By that, I mean even the banks, perhaps even no trace at all. So how are you looking to, see how it is that, illegal proceeds or proceeds of corruption, when they find their way into real estate, how are you, putting your eye on that, and how do you hope to, regulate or catch those who choose to use that means instead of, say, through the banks, which might make it a lot easier for you to trace?
Well, that's the entire thing that we are looking at now. As it is today, every real estate developer is expected to be making returns to Special Control Unit against money laundering, in terms of who purchased or who own what. But the regulation there is somewhat sketchy, and that is why when I came on board, we have scaled up activities of the Special Control Unit against money laundering, because we believe that is the way. We have succeeded since when I came on board to ensure that in each and every zonal office of the EFCC, we have that unit. And then, of course, we have a lot of personnel posted there. We have upgraded it into a directorate. We have posted some officers that we can vouch for their character and their ability to deal with that situation. You see, it's a huge problem, even from, let me just give you an example. We investigated a matter in which a bank's MD marketed a property to a minister of a federal republic, and the minister agreed to purchase that property. And then, of course, negotiations, took place back and forth. At the end of the day, the minister agreed that yes, she is interested in buying the property. Agreed for $37.5 million US. Now, the bank sent a vehicle to her house, and then in the first instance, $20 million were evacuated from her house. The bank succeeded in putting it into their system, and they paid the developer. And then a lawyer, set up a special purpose vehicle where the title documents were now transferred into. And then, of course, he is posing as if he's the owner of that property. You can see how the problem is. And that is what, we are saying when we say that, that is the area where we need to work on and strengthen. Now, without the help of the bankers, the minister couldn't have even imagined, collecting $20 million from anybody. Without the opportunity in the real sector, she couldn't have think of, where to even launder the process of crime, et cetera, et cetera. And this is just one of. It is happening on a daily basis in this country. And that is one area where we said that, look, we have to look at, and then, of course, we believe that if we succeed at the end of the day, the problem will be solved.
We'll take a break at this moment and we'll come back with some more questions for you when we come back from this break. Please stay with us. Abdurrashid Bawa, who is the Chairman of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, is our guest this morning. He is still with us via Zoom. If I may ask you, I know you have said you're focusing on the gatekeepers, but largely, more and more, I'm sure that before now, you're very aware of the criticisms against the commission which you now head. Interestingly, you have risen through the ranks. You were with the EFCC from conception, and I'm sure that you're aware of some of the shortcomings and also perhaps the public perception of the EFCC. How are you sidestepping the line mines? Criticisms such as the EFCC is no longer as effective as it used to be, or it is a political tool, or, you know, those kinds of comments, or that sometimes it oftentimes rushes to the media trial, or that, you know, they won't have completed their own thorough investigation before names are mentioned, thereby bungling their cases. How are you sidestepping some of the criticisms that already existed before you came into office?
By taking decisions according to the laws of the country. People will always talk, my sister. People will always talk. If you are doing the right thing, people will talk. If you are doing the wrong thing, people will talk. But the bottom line is that, are you doing, you know, what you have to do based on the available facts that you have? Issues of media trial, we have said it time and time again. We have an obligation to tell Nigerians what we are doing. And once matters are in court, you know, they become you know, public knowledge. Anybody can apply to court to know what is happening. You know, they can, journalists like you can go ahead, you know, and get these court papers, and of course, you know, tell the whole world what is out there. People have accused us of the fact that we don't carry out a thorough investigation, and we rush to court on some of these issues. But then how come that we have, you know, 95 to 98% success rate in court? When a student writes an exams and he scored 70 over 100, he's given an A. And here we are, you know, scoring 95 to 98%, and that means we have an A. And then people will just take one issue and then they will say that, yes, EFCC have been losing cases. What are those cases that we are losing? EFCC, there is no organization in Nigeria that has contributed to the development of law in this country in the last 15 years, more than the EFCC. Because of the fact that, you know, that is what we are expected to do, to investigate and then, of course, to prosecute. We manage the biggest chamber in this country. You know, we have investigated and prosecuted governors, you know, top security personnel, top generals in this country, senators, ministers. That has never happened before in this country. People have forgotten where we were before the EFCC and what the EFCC was able to do when it came on board in 2003. You know, we are doing our best. Are we saying that we are perfect in all that we do? Certainly not. But we are doing it, you know. There's nothing like sidestepping, you know, based on available evidence, you know, before my predecessors, and that is why they are taking, that is why they took the actions that they took. And then, of course, that is what we are doing now going forward. You know, we look at the case, we conclude the investigation, we send it to our legal department, they peruse through, they vet it, you know, they come up with the charges, and we file in court. And then, of course, what is expected of us is to present our case, you know, to prove our case beyond reasonable doubt. And the defense is having the opportunity of opening his case to also say his own side of the story. It is only the EFCC, you know, that have been prosecuting cases in this country for 12 years, and we have been succeeding. You know, so I don't know
what are your benchmarks? What would you consider your benchmarks? Because considering just how widespread corruption is, how prevalent it is, and how humongous your work must be, it would seem that Nigerians have a different benchmark by which they're judging the work that you do. And of course, you must have your own internal benchmarks. What are the standards that you have set for yourself within the EFCC?
Well, the vision of the EFCC is very clear: to rid this country of economic and financial crimes. And that is the benchmark. That is what we want to achieve. Are we there yet? Certainly not. Are we working towards that? Certainly, of course, yes. People have come up with all sorts of benchmarks to say how much money you have recovered, how much convictions you have secured. Now, on what parameter are you basing that? If you recover 100 billion, are you saying that it is only 100 billion has been stolen by this country? In this country? If you secured 1,000 convictions, are you saying that it is only 1,000 people that have committed crimes? So I don't see those issues as benchmarks. What I think we should be looking at is, how far we have gone in what we are doing in terms of bringing in avenues or ways in which we are preventing this. And that is the way to go. There are a lot of intangible things that the Commission have done that are neither convictions nor recoveries, but they are very effective in the sense that they prevent the commission of economic and financial crimes itself. So by and large, you tend to see that what benchmarks are you going to look at? And the only thing that you have to do is to continue to do your work.
Well, part of what is also out there, they also accuse the EFCC of treating interim forfeiture as final judgment, whereas they say no, but that's usually granted so that you don't destroy the rest pending final judgment. So have you heard that kind of accusation, and what is it thinking about that moving forward?
Anybody that is accusing us of that doesn't know what he's doing. Interim, and then EFCC is taking it as final. Is it that we don't understand English? There's difference between interim and final. How can we take an interim for future as final for future? Certainly not. I've never heard of that before, because it's very ridiculous for somebody to accuse an agency of international repute like us that we are taking interim for future as final for future. Come on.
Well, that is what some of those who have cases have suggested, because you're just a little over 100 days in office, so it may not be your term, but yes, you've been there before.
I've been around to be able to answer this. There is no time in the EFCC where we tend to see interim for future as final for future. It's impossible. Look, we have a full-fledged department that deals with the issues of recovered assets. We call it Asset for Future Recovery Management Department. We have the legal department. You have the investigators that are doing this, tracing and identification of these assets. Then all of this, we will not see it that, look, this is an interim for future, and then we are taking it a final for future. Okay, who did we hand it over to? Who is the victim that will take interim for future assets and give? It's practically impossible for that to happen.
Now, about the property matter. So what is the requirement or expectation here? Is there a threshold with which if anyone who is buying a property exceeds, they need to let the Commission know, or anyone who buys any property, they need to let the Commission know? What laws would they be violating if they don't?
Well, it's not that you cannot go ahead and buy. You can buy your property anytime. It is the real estate, those that are selling those properties, that are expected to make returns. Just the Money Laundering Prohibition Act provides for two types of agencies per se. You have the financial institutions, you have the non-designated financial institutions. Now, both of them are required to make returns or reports to either NFIU or SCUMO. For instance, when it comes to the NFIU, the banks or the financial institutions are expected to make currency transaction reports and suspicious transaction reports. They are just reports that they are expected to make statutorily for NFIU to look at, and then, of course, to see whether there is any red flag in any of those transactions. And then, of course, you have the returns, which is from, for instance, the real estate to SCUMO. That is real estate developers are classified as non-designated financial institutions. Now, those returns, it is for SCUMO to now peruse through to add value to the information and to see whether there is any cause for alarm. And then, of course, it will be taken forward. So there is no threshold per se to say that you are buying a property of 1 million or 10 million or 10 billion. and that it is when maybe it is at a certain amount or threshold that you make reports. No, it is all transactions when it comes to that.
So what is the thinking now about managing looted assets?
What is the what?
What is the plan? Because previously there was this argument about looted assets. So I know that there are some measures that are being taken to ensure that, I mean, if any questions are asked, people can see these are the looted assets, this is what has been done moving forward. So what's the current situation about that?
Well, the current situation, we have the process of Crime Act before the National Assembly. They are trying to come up with, legislative, law that will deal with those situations. In the EFCC, we have the provisions of our act that guides us on how to manage these assets. And of course, we have the regulation from the Office of the Attorney General of the Federation. Those are the issues that are in place now. But internally, since when I came on board, we are working towards digitalization of our processes, the entire processes of the commission. And God willing, we'll come out better for it in terms of, how some of these statistics are being kept. By and large, there's no problem in this regard, going forward, inshallah.
Well, there is a question from one of our viewers sent in via email asking to ask the EFCC chairman how the commission deals with its staff who are compromised because, according to him, there have been some of the members of EFCC being settled by some individuals involved in financial crime, as not all cases are published in the public domain.
Well, the EFCC is among the few agencies in this country that has a full-fledged department, that police the affairs of, its staff. We have a department called the Department of Internal Affairs. It was established in 2003. It is a department that is saddled with the responsibility of, policing the investigators that have taken the other way, around their professional ethics. Now, that department is there. And since when I came on board, we have made some changes in there. We have given them, the go-ahead to, reorganize the department and come up with, the way going forward. But the way to go about some of these things is that we need information about these issues. We are not angels. We did not come from heaven. We are human beings. Chances are that, of course, you find one or two people that, are not thinking the EFCC way of thinking in terms of being above board. So we need this information, and we assure Nigerians that we are going to deal with whoever is found wanting. Just last week, before my trip to New York, we suspended some officers that were found to have engaged in one or two, acts of corruption, and that is the way we have to do what we have to do to ensure that at least, this is not a place where such should happen.
Is that suspension the worst, such case in the EFCC? I know you've been there for long enough to know. And then you talked about some form of restructuring that's taking place in the EFCC now. What was wrong, and how does this, okay, let me use that word again, restructuring, gonna help to make things better, to forestall a recurrence?
Well, suspension is not, you asked about three questions at the same time. Suspension is not, the only thing that happens. We have prosecuted our staff that have been found wanting, et cetera, et cetera. What is wrong in restructuring? When you have a new leadership and it has different thinking on the way things should be done, of course, it will restructure the place. Restructuring does not mean that you are changing, things upside down. It may be that you are creating some new units or some new sections within the department. And of course, when you are moving staff in and out, it's part of restructuring. When we are, looking towards coming up with policies and procedures and, strategies, tactical, operational, and strategic. Is all part of restructuring. So I don't understand what you mean that as if it is only when there's problem that one can restructure. No, if you want to improve on what you are doing, you can restructure as well.
Well, after all, change is, I mean, the only permanent thing, right? But there was a time the president, not once actually, used the expression, corruption is fighting back. And for a lot of Nigerians, it was quite worrisome, really, because hearing the president say corruption is fighting back just painted the picture in a whole new light for them. As you've said time and again, you've been in the EFCC long enough, witnessed, different administrations. You've seen, I mean, you've been lead investigator in a lot of high-profile cases. So, how true is that, if I could say, maxim? When you fight corruption, corruption will fight back today.
Last week, I was in New York, as all Nigerians are aware of, and a very senior citizen received a phone call from somebody that is not even under investigation, but what he said to him on phone is that he's going to kill the EFCC chairman, the young man, that I'm going to kill him, just to tell you how bad it is. And it's actually real. It's actually real. Corruption can fight back.
You say you get death threats, am I right?
Yes.
So what does that do, really? How does that maybe inspire you, really, in this whole fight against corruption? If I could just add this other question to it. I mean, there are different areas, different sectors in the country that we've seen corruption cases crop up. Which would you say has seen the grandest of them all over time? I know you are quite vast in the petroleum industry. There's politics, there's the ICT, and some would say the internet fraudsters and the rest. Just which sector has seen the grandest? You talked about real estate as well the other time, but which of them, I mean, experiences the grandest of these corruptions?
Well, I don't have any, there is no study, that is done or was done that, can give you this to say that this one is the grandest than this, etc., etc. It's everywhere. When you look at cybercrime, for instance, from January to the 3rd of June, that I have the statistics, the EFCC will have arrested 1,436 suspected cyber criminals across the Federation. Now, if you look at it in this, from this perspective, can you say that the EFCC have arrested up to 100 people within that period that are engaged in public corruption? So you may say that this is the grandest. But if you look at the issues of maybe recoveries that have been made in within the same period, you can see the oil and gas sector, coming on top on that in terms of where we tend to recover, money more than any other sector in this job that we do. And then, of course, you look at a lot of things that is happening within the private sector in terms of giving back and forth briberies, etc. So by and large, I will not be able to pinpoint one area to say that this is an area that is the grandest. Depends on the variables you're looking at, depends on the parameters that you set out to, conduct such a study, etc., etc. So, but it's everywhere. I think what we just have to do is to change our attitude as Nigerians, to look inwards and know that, look, we just have to do what we have to do. Let me give you an instance. For instance, when you were reading Daily Times today, and then the front page, I think, if I remember correctly, is talking about CBN, NIMASA, and NNPC, etc. But there are lots of things that are going on in other sectors of the economy. Take, for instance, the educational sector, the health sector as well. There is a lot of corruption going on there without, Nigerians feeling that something is ongoing there. The private sector, foreign companies, multinational companies are also there doing what they have to do. Currently, we are investigating, a multinational company that sold Forex to an indigenous company, claiming that, they got the Forex through some other means, only for them again to now, filed the name of that company to central bank claiming forex because they sold forex to him at a lower, rate. What is more scandalous or economic crime than this? So it's everywhere. You can't actually pinpoint one area to say that is the grandest.
All right. Well, as we wind down now, what is the commission or your impression about states that are establishing anti-corruption agencies? Because many of the impression that, well, if states are beginning to establish that, does that then limit the powers of EFCC to look into affairs of those states?
Well, wherever we can find assistance in what we are doing, we welcome it. The fact that states are creating agencies like that does not in any way, diminish the powers of a commission like ours that, was established as a result of from the National Assembly. Certainly not. There are a lot of about 2-3 decided cases where that has been established, even by the Supreme Court. So that is already settled. What some states are doing or have done did not in any way, diminish the powers of the EFCC. Not at all. Not at all. But we welcome it. We welcome it.
Okay. Well, the CBN has washed its hands of crypto, even though they'll have a digital currency, as they say, before the year ends. Is the commission looking that way, cryptocurrency management in the country?
Well, as it is today, there is no where in the world where cryptocurrency is being regulated. The EFCC, we are looking at this issue of cryptocurrency as an avenue in which people are laundering their process of crime, in which people are receiving their process of crime, and that is our worry. We have seen time and time again how cyber criminals are using these avenues to get their process of crime. Before, it used to be through money transfer agencies like MoneyGram and, of course, Western Union. Now they have gone E. They will defraud somebody, they will get a gift card, they will change it, exchange it on dark web, and then they will use the proceeds to buy crypto. And then, of course, they can get it onto their e-wallet. And then, of course, we can, they can sell and get their money. As it is today, we have about $20 million worth of cryptocurrency as the last statistics that I have, because we also created our own e-wallet to recover cryptocurrency. It has never happened before, but we created it. We are now recovering this, process of crime from that means as well. So we are in support of what the CBN have done, because it has limited, the ease in which some of these criminals can exchange their crypto and get naira for it. But that does not mean that people are not using it to, launder their process of crime. It's something that the whole world is afraid of. It's something that the whole world is looking at. And I believe that Nigeria will not be left behind when it comes to making its own contribution to ensure that, laws and regulations are put in place to checkmate excesses on the usage of cryptocurrencies.
I think that's quite important. I mean, to catch a monkey, you know what they say. Sometimes you have to act like a monkey. But on a final note, I'd like to know how you treat petitions from the public. I'm sure you're aware of some of these, statements saying petitions have been submitted to the EFCC and people don't think anything has been done about it. So just how often do you receive petitions and what actions do you take on them? And are you obliged to give feedback to the people that, well, this is what we did about the petition, this is what we found out, and this is how we're proceeding?
To start with, we need to understand that the EFCC is created to carry out certain mandate. And those mandates are very clear. Now, petitions that we receive hundreds of petitions across the 15 zonal offices that we have, around the country on daily basis, hundreds of them. But we have what we call in all these zonal offices petition vetting committee. these committees are expected to go through these petitions and see whether or not the content of those petitions fall in line with what the EFCC is mandated to enforce. And once that is done, they recommend, their findings. And those that are rejected, we have the obligation of communicating back to the petitioners or the complainant that, look, your petition has been rejected. We tell you the reason behind that, and then we advise you either go to the police or to the customs, or to also advise you that your complaint is civil in nature. And of course, we are a criminal institution. We are a criminal investigation institution, not a civil institution that look at some of these issues. So that is what is being done. And for any petition that is recommended for investigation, it will be assigned to various sections that we have within the investigation department or operations department for investigation and subsequent prosecution, as the case may be. So we receive all petitions, but it is not all petitions that are within our mandate to investigate. And then, of course, we have to return them back. But that does not mean that we can only investigate cases that are being reported to us. You remember the provision of, I don't know whether you're aware, provision of Section 7 of the EFCC Establishment Act provides that the EFCC can cause investigation when somebody violates the provisions of the EFCC Establishment Act, or when it comes to the attention of the EFCC that the person's lifestyle is not commensurate with his sources of income. The Commission can cause an investigation in that regard. So those are the issues that we consider when it comes to petitions that are being sent to us, etc. But again, the committees are being guided by a lot of things that we have given them to guide them on what to do. For instance, because of the special mandate that we have in fighting cybercrime, whether somebody has lost money, whether it is all elements of cybercrime. Because by law, possession of fraudulent document is an offense, attempt is an offense, OBT itself is an offense. We do that. Now, when it comes to public sector corruption, irrespective of what is the amount that is involved there, we tend to go for it, whether you are a councillor, whether you are a civil servant, etc., etc. But when it comes to the issue of you and I, Chamberlain, because of one problem between you and I, etc., there is element of fraud. We tend to have threshold on that because we cannot do everything, even though there is element of fraud in it. We can't be investigating cases for, let's say, ₦1 million, 500,000, 200,000. We will be overwhelmed because we're a specialized agency that is saddled with the responsibility of curtailing and working on, economic crime. So we have a threshold on that tends to guide us. It depends, again, from one zone to another. For instance, if you say that, let me just leave it at that. It depends from one zone to another so that I will not be saying something to demean some certain zonal offices or some certain states.
Okay, well, I think on that note then, perhaps another 265 days may not be out of place to review some of these activities and then what we all need to do to ensure that we are in the right stead moving forward. But we do thank you for coming on, Mr. Abdullahi, Chairman of the EFCC. All the best.
It's all my pleasure. Thank you.
We're back in a moment. Don't go away.
The Senate is holding this special session to mark the second anniversary of the 9th Senate, and it provides the opportunity for stock-taking and assessment of its legislative interventions in the last 2 years. When the 9th Assembly started, the Senate developed a legislative agenda with focus on the economy, security, constitution amendment, judicial and electoral reforms.
I'm sure that governance will be improved.
At the special session, Senate President Ahmad Lawan says the upper chamber is on track in fulfilling its legislative agenda.
About 742 bills were introduced during the 2 sessions of the Assembly. of which 58 have been passed, 355 bills have gone through first reading, 175 bills have gone through second reading. One of our most significant interventions in this sector is the restoration of the national annual budget to the January to December cycle.
The refrain from majority of the lawmakers at this special session is that the Senate has performed well, but they are mindful of the problems still confronting the country.
Since we came here from day one, we've been confronted with the serious issues of insecurity in this country. And what have we done? We set up a committee headed by the leader of the Senate, and far-reaching resolutions were passed by these chambers that were sent to the executive. The fact that those actions were not taken, or rather the resolution were not implemented, is not our fault.
While the senators give themselves a pass mark, two public analysts disagree with them.
For me, from the evidence, irrefutable evidence before all Nigerians, they have not performed well, because if they have done so, we wouldn't have these killings. If they perform well, we wouldn't have these kidnappings. What statement have they made on the Twitter ban? Absolutely nothing.
Have they passed the electoral bill? They have not. Have they changed the electoral act? No. 2 years, they have not been able to do that. What have they been doing? Did they pass the PIB? No.
It's 2 more years until the expiration of the 9th Assembly, and in the time left, Nigerians would want to see the Senate be more responsive to the issues troubling citizens, enact important legislations like the Petroleum Industry Bill and Electoral Act, and demonstrate more commitment to legislative business. Linda Akibi, Channels Television News.
Yes, they also did a lot of that, standing up to observe 1 minute silence. That has also gone on quite a bit in both chambers of the National Assembly. But we are focusing on their 2 years since their inauguration, 2 years of the National Assembly since inauguration. And we have a senator here with us, Senator Abdullahi is the Deputy Chief Whip and also a member of the All Progressives Congress. Senator, you're welcome to Sunrise Daily this morning.
Thank you for having me, Mogbai.
Well, you saw that report by our correspondent, Linda Akibi. She's covered the National Assembly for a while now, particularly the Senate. And that's what some analysts had to say about how they perceive the assessment of the National Assembly, especially the 9th Assembly 2 years on. What will be your response to those who say, really, what have they been doing in the last 2 years? We haven't seen significant bills, especially the ones that they themselves promised delivered to Nigerians.
Well, first, let me congratulate Nigerians for the 2 years of democracy in this, second term of President Muhammadu Buhari, and of course, our own 2 years as a legislature. As it is, of course, just like rightly captured by the reporter, well, we came on board in June 2019. We definitely presented a legislative agenda. And that legislative agenda was to help us focus and remain on track in terms of our duty in the 3 core areas, which is lawmaking, representation, and oversight. And let me say, with all sense of duty and modesty, that to the best of my knowledge, I think we've done our best. We've also acknowledged that, yes, we can do more. And that is the essence of the appraisal, which we said we should do, having spent 2 years. Now, it's easy for people to say we do nothing, because many of them don't even know how the National Assembly works. And if they do,
certainly not the analysts who spoke.
Well, some of the analysts, they just have, how many times have they gone to the National Assembly to stay and to see what happened?
You have to go to know how it works.
Well, it's easy for them. It's when you go there that you know exactly whether the senators are working or the House of Rep members are working or not. You see, like they've said, we've flagged off some very critical legislations. The Constitutional Review, the Electoral Act, the PIB, it is not something you just carry and just say, okay, here is it. No. There is a lot of work. This is democracy. And you agree with me that there are so many stakeholders who are interested in whatever legislation we are passing, especially legislation that are of this magnitude. And so let me say very clearly that for the past 2 years, ever since the petroleum industry bill was introduced, for example, I haven't gone for the first reading, second reading, and it was referred to the joint committee. I will tell you that the joint committee have begun consultation since that time, including the local communities, the international stakeholders, and everybody who is key to making sure that when this legislation is passed, it is going to work for Nigerians. Remember, we've made it very clear
Senator,
that we are going to be a Senate
sure you are very aware of the fact that this is not the first time we've heard of the PIB.
Yes, I know.
And you know what a torturous journey the PIB has been through in the National Assembly. We saw in the 8th Assembly, which you were also a part of, there were attempts to break it down so that at least we could, pass it in bits and let us see how that would fare. It was seen that now, even that one that was passed in bits, I don't know that we got concurrence from the House, from the House of Representatives to make it a law. We do not know how that fared. But now the PIB is back. It was the National Assembly itself that promised to deliver the electoral amendment before the end of the first quarter of this year. And this is, this deadline, they haven't met. Okay. Those people just a moment. Those who know better say, and those who are part of the committee say, we have since finished work. We do not understand why this bill has not been introduced on the floor of both the House and the Senate so that work can be done on it.
Well, that is their own saying. And to the best of my knowledge, as an insider, as one of the senators...
These are from insiders.
Well, who are the insiders?
The insiders who worked on the bill.
Let me tell you, as far as I know, we have a process through which we work. And if you have a process, you see, it is when we jump some of these processes that we end up running into problems. In the last assembly that you talked about, the reasons why this thing never saw the light of the day was because of the unhealthy relationship. And so that did a lot of damage, even though good work were done. But in this case, I want to assure you very strongly that we are working together with the executive to ensure that all the gray areas that will prevent this bill from seeing the light of the day are being tackled. Which one of the bills now? The electoral bill? All the bills.
The PIB?
All the bills. Because you see, what we did, if you remember, there were a lot of bills that were returned unsigned by Mr. President. And that was in the last assembly. And we reviewed all the areas where these bills created problems from the executive angle. When we came in the ninth assembly, we have a joint committee of the National Assembly, the Senior Special Assistant to Mr. President, Senate, and the Ministry of Justice. And the intendment here is some of these little technical areas, we can nip them in the bud so that the good work we have done on any particular bill will see the light of the day. Now, with respect to the electoral bill, based on our timetable, by the grace of God, in July, before we go on the summer recess, we'll be passing the electoral bill. Because a lot of work has gone into it. Just like you said, if they have done the work, yes, they've done the work. But doing the work does not mean the end of the work until it is passed. So if there are issues that needs to be tidied up, we take care of that because we really want this bill to come, and we are not unmindful of the fact that we don't want it to fall into that period when politics will overshadow everything. So we're not unmindful of that.
Let me get that commitment again.
Yeah.
You said before when?
By the grace of God, in July, ideally based on our calendar, by July we'll be going for our summer recess. And before then, the Electoral Act will be passed. Ditto for the PIB. In fact, we are resuming next week, 21st, or is it 22nd? Tuesday. And by the grace of God, upon our resumption, the PIB will be ready for laying, and subsequently we'll schedule it for consideration. So let me say very clearly that some of the issues, you see, we are a Senate that is also looking back and reflecting on the lessons we have learned. And that is not lost on us. The Electoral Act is very important. The PIB is very important. We don't want to do a shoddy job. We don't want to rush it simply because some people feel, oh, you need to pass this. No, we need to do a thorough job so that at the end of the day, when that bill is finally signed, it will achieve the very objective for which it was being packaged in the first instance. So I believe very strongly that this night Senate, we are taking in its stride all the lessons we have learned from the 8th Assembly. Fortunately, some of us were there. We know exactly what happened. We know areas where we also faltered. And on the basis of that, we are making sure that we want to get it right this time around.
Okay, so that's in the area of bills.
Yeah.
In the area of representation, how would you say that you have fared?
Well, the area of representation requires that every single senator looks at his senatorial district and whatever is of grave concern to its people brings it on the floor of the Senate. And I want to tell you very clearly that we have done that tremendously. In fact, there are days in which when an issue comes up, because it is happening in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 senatorial districts, we end up debating the issue completely that day. And I think the issue of insecurity is one that has actually received a lot of attention because many of us are being challenged in our senatorial district. And of course, the best we can do is to bring these issues on the floor of the Senate, discuss it, and try to come up with resolutions to draw attention to the executive arm of government with respect to tackling this insecurity. And I also want to say that in the initial, in the first year, when we came on board, of course, we were worried about the state of insecurity, and that was why we convened the Security Summit. In that Security Summit, we invited all the critical stakeholders, the religious group, the community leaders, the security agencies themselves, and we deliberated exhaustively and came up with very far-reaching recommendations, some of which were being considered. For example, it was after that we came onto the Police Act and even the Police Trust Fund. So we are doing quite a lot, but like one of my colleagues said on the floor, we also have a limit because whatever we present to the executive, we expect them to take very seriously. In many instances, yes, they do, while in some other instances, of course, not much action is taken. So I think for us is basically saying that we remain committed, we remain focused on exactly what we intend to do, especially that we have all packaged all of this in a legislative agenda that is to be our guide. And the essence is so that we don't derail from whatever is important. So I believe very sincerely and strongly that the Night Senate has come up with that legislative agenda because we really want to implement it. And of course, for example, the very first one we took was the issue of budget. The issue of budget reform has been ongoing, and I think with the restoration of the January to December budget cycle, the National Assembly has been able to do something very tremendous that will provide a better platform for economic planning and also the execution of projects. And I think for the first time, 2020 budget was implemented 100%. That never happened before. 2020 budget was implemented 100%.
You mean both capital and, or you just mean the recurrent side of things?
Everything.
Despite COVID?
Yes.
2020 budget was if you remember, implemented 100%.
Yes, you remember, with COVID, we came back and did the supplementary, if you remember. And the essence was, immediately COVID came on board, we sat down with the executive and challenged them to the fact that there are certain things we cannot do. And that we are now having a national challenge. So we took money from areas where we know, based on the COVID, will no longer be critical, and took it into addressing the COVID. And so within that context, we were able to get the executive to pay attention to the disruption that COVID has brought onto the Nigerian economy and the life of our citizens.
Well, I think that, the oversight, perhaps, will be able to reveal even more as to, just how that has gone. But I want to focus a bit more on the question of security. Yeah. Frequently, it would seem more often than not now, you have to stand up almost every time to, observe a minute's silence for those who have lost their lives. You say that you have had occasion to speak with the security agencies and come up with resolutions, but more often than not, and I'm sure that you chose your words very carefully when you said that your resolutions are to call attention to the problem. Oftentimes, what people would have expected is that the National Assembly, when they speak, the executive will listen, because they have more than just the power of advice, it would seem. They also have the power of coercion. I mean, if the president is not, they have powers to check the president, to check the executive arm of government. And if government is failing in certain areas, they have powers to be able to call the executive to order. Isn't that correct? Absolutely. If that is the situation, why would it seem that this particular National Assembly has pandered somewhat to the executive arm of government? There are people who think that as a result of that, the National Assembly has not been as effective as it ought to be in bringing the executive to check.
Well, it's easy for people to make that kind of assertion, but let's get these facts straight. Over the last 1 year or 1.5 years, the entire world was dealing and grappling with the issue of the COVID-19 pandemic. And you see, when you have a country that was already dealing with an insecurity and a weak economy coming to face the pandemic, which has weakened global economy, now you need to ask yourself, are you going to pick up a fight or you are going to pick up a dialogue? We choose to pick a dialogue instead of a fight, because we believe when we sit down and dialogue, we are able to get better results. And I think the National Assembly has done tremendously well on this front. Like I told you, you were somehow surprised when I said we implemented the 2020 budget 100%. This was simply because we had a very strong interface with the Minister of Finance, trying to look at the issues that are confronting this nation. And it is through that continuous engagement we had with them, having series of meetings with them while the pandemic was on. The chamber was closed, but the leadership was on ground. And the result of that deliberation came up with so many issues, including even the presidential committee on the COVID-19. We engaged them and interfaced with them in a manner that brought out all the necessary things we need to do as intervention to help Nigerian public that are now grappling with having to stay indoors and so many other things. So for me, let me say that, yes, in the last assembly, many people saw how the confrontations went. What were the results? And at the end of the day, in this particular instance, we choose dialogue. What are the results? We've been able to get so many good results this time around. Even the economy, we went into recession and came out of it. Many people didn't know the behind-the-scene work that has to happen to make sure that these things are
distinguished. The only reason why, and we have been told that several times, one of the major reasons why Nigeria came out of a recession is because of an increase in oil prices.
No, that is not correct.
That is correct.
That is not correct.
That is correct.
Because you see, the issue there is that there are so many activities that are taking place. Go into the details of the statistics, and you will see areas where, despite the pandemic, a lot of things have happened. Because you see, our citizens...
Where Nigerians have been very productive?
Yes.
Apart from the telecom sector?
Well, you say apart from the telecom sector, what happened during the pandemic globally? Everybody went online.
Indeed.
Yes. So, and if Nigerians do not have the capacity
what work did the senators contribute, or the National Assembly contribute to Nigerians going online?
Well, in the first instance, there was disruption of people's life. And because we sat down with the executive, we came up with many social intervention schemes under the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs. And as a result of all of those, we had intervention going to small and medium enterprises. The Ministry of, what did they call it, Trade and Investment had their programs where they were helping small scale, small and medium.
Distinguished, have you been able to do an overview in the different constituencies? I don't know whether all the senators have been able to go home to ask about how those programs ran in their different constituencies. But we do know that there was a lot of talk around that period as to how people, senators themselves were complaining about how their constituent members were not getting these things.
You see, let me tell you one thing. When you have a program, you may not get it 100%. But if there is a very huge performance of that program, then it will make the impact. And I want to say very clearly.
In your constituency, you made the impact?
There are some impact.
How are you able to rate it on a scale to 100?
Well, I don't have the statistics here, so I can't be telling you.
Distinguished, I think you should be able to say, you know, if you say it made a great impact, then you should be able to say, you should be able to rate it.
When you want to talk about impact, I'm a researcher. If you don't have the fact, you don't speak on the facts.
Okay.
I don't have the facts, so I can't engage you.
But you say that it makes
yes, but I know that it made some impact.
Without any fact. Without any fact.
I said it made some impact.
Okay.
In the sense that I'm aware of some people who benefited from what was being done.
Okay.
But since I don't have the total figure against maybe an established benchmark, I cannot be talking about impact here.
Let me flip this to Lagos now. I understand my colleague has a question for you. Kaede.
Oh, yes, Mark. Well, thank you very much. Senator, one of the big opportunities that a lot of people thought the National Assembly had, especially last year, to make a statement on this relationship between itself and the executive. We talked about being a rubber stamp National Assembly. Was that resolution that was passed at the House to invite the president, to speak on the state of insecurity and what is being done? First, we heard that the Senate pulled out, and that didn't happen eventually. A lot of people still raise that and wonder how the National Assembly allowed that to slide pretty much. And I remember particularly you on this program, it was about 4 years ago, seated there in Abuja, you said that the powers to summon anybody within the context of our democracy is given to the National Assembly. Those were your words, word for word. So did that change? Did you make an exception for the president, or you think that maybe sometime in the future the National Assembly will make it right?
Well, I agree with you totally that the National Assembly has powers to summon anybody. But remember, Mr. President is not anybody. He's president of the country. And I think within that context, the Constitution defines how the National Assembly will deal with the president. So I think we need to understand this difference. When we say anybody, Mr. President is not just anybody. He's the president of the Federation. And I think the National Assembly, the Senate, in its judgment at that time, felt that that was not necessary. And I think that was why perhaps the Senate never, backed it. So it's not done to, prove any point or to show that, we are irresponsible. It was just simply to look at the context within which that was taking place. So that's exactly what happened.
When you say the president is not anybody, I mean, the president is elected by Nigerians. The president is not above the law, as it were. The speaker had a meeting with the president, came out and gave the commitment of the president. So, I mean, when you say the president is not anybody, are you saying that, because your statement was quite clear, I mean, within the context of a democracy, so are you saying the president is outside of the democracy that we operate? Is he above the democracy we operate? Or what exactly do you mean by that?
Listen to what I said. I said, Mr. President is, the president is not just anybody. He's the president. And when you say president, that is clearly defined. And I'm saying the Constitution has provided framework upon how you are going to deal with the president. So the point I'm saying here is that whenever there is a decision which falls within our discretion, I think it is the wisdom of the senators to agree or to disagree. And if it was the consensus that no, we don't need to invite Mr. President, I think that should be respected. I don't see anything wrong in that. And there is no any specific law. Like you can see in the House of Rep, for example, I know there is a bill saying that Mr. President, we should sign there should be a bill in which Mr. President, or any president for that matter, will be compelled to give an address called the State of the Nation. That, to me, there's nothing wrong in that.
All right, I know we need to wind down.
Something that is, in the making. But within the context of what you asked, I stand by what I said earlier, that yes, the National Assembly is given powers to invite anybody within the context of what it is legislating upon. And the Constitution is very clear on how that is going to be done. And our committees have been inviting people. But what I'm saying is, in this context, Mr. President is not just anybody. And I stand by saying Mr. President is not anybody. He's the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
All right, I know we need to wind down.
That was a very sore point for lawmakers. I still remember Senator Adetumbi, who is your colleague in the APC, saying that if the president wouldn't come, because it was on a matter of security, if the president wouldn't come, that perhaps lawmakers could go and meet the president. Were you able to
Yes,
take on that
you see,
suggestion as a group and go to meet the president? And maybe perhaps explain that his address to you would also have been an address to Nigerians who were equally as concerned as you were on the security situation in the country.
You see, we need to be fair to one another. The matter in which you wanted to invite Mr. President has to do with security. We have invited several times the security heads to interface with us. They've interfaced with us and told us whatever they feel it is necessary for them to tell us. Because when it comes to security matters, not everything will be divulged out. Because when you do so, you are compromising your security.
Indeed. I mean, even when you meet the security head, you go into closed doors meetings
yes, within
with them,
that
don't
context,
you?
what I'm saying is that if these people have given us all of these information, tell me of what use will you be inviting Mr. President when exactly anything Mr. President will be coming to say will be facts that are emanating from these same security heads. You see, to me, that is superfluous. And I think, like I said, inviting Mr. President in an open theater as it is, or in an open environment as it is in the parliament, anything can happen. People can say anything, and that may not help the matter. So what we felt was the security situation does not require this noise. What it requires is calmness, deep thinking, wisdom, and strategy.
The question is,
and I think,
what is the form?
And I think, let me land. And I think based on what we agreed, the President of the Senate was mandated to interface with Mr. President. And he has done that on several occasions. And I want to say that in many of these instances, when he does, definitely some actions are being taken.
Okay, we'll have to leave it there, Senator. I believe that this assessment, at the end of the day, it will be between you and Nigerians, because ultimately you represent their interests at the National Assembly.
Absolutely.
We have to thank you so much for sharing your thoughts this morning. Senator Abdullahi is the Deputy Chief Whip of the Senate, the 9th Senate, which is now 2 years old, and also a member of the All Progressives Congress. Once again, thank you for coming on Sunrise Today.
Thank you for having me, my pleasure.
We'll now quickly take your mails. We see this one from Silas Ono talking about lawmaking. He says, when I see senators talking about presidential assent as if it is mandatory requirement for making a law, it breaks my heart that our lawmakers don't even know our law. He says if the president refuses assent, both chambers can pass a law again and dispense with the president's assent, and such a bill become a law carrying full legitimacy. This is included in our constitution to make the National Assembly independent. I'm sure that Senator Abdullahi would have had a word or two to say on that. But yes, indeed, we do know that there are other provisions where the president's assent can be vetoed if he's not, if he's not given an assent to a certain law. I think that is the thoughts of Silas Ono. Gentlemen.
Well, unfortunately, we couldn't find out if Senator still stands by that hate speech bill in the 8th Assembly since, social media is in the front burner today. But hopefully he'll tell us some other time. But how about this one from Olagunju? Oladele talking about fighting corruption. He says, the first duty of asking for good governance and accountability from a corrupt system is to be educated. How do you fight corruption when the majority of Nigerians don't even have an idea of their civil rights? How do you fight corruption when the government keeps denying the civil rights of the few that keeps asking for good governance and a corrupt-free nation?
Well, Demola Lalade is talking about corruption as well, saying with the advent of EFCC, the level of corruption has reduced in the country, but a lot still needs to be done to stem corruption in Nigeria. He has a suggestion that those employed into the commission be well remunerated so that they are not compromised in any way. And, he goes on. So, good suggestion, right?
Well, this one very, very quickly is from Veronica. Professor Anakina. That's the one we took. It says, also, there is massive investment in human capacity development. There is concerted efforts to build the SMEs, which is the economic hub of the Western world, bring the interest rate to single digit, diversify the economy, build stronger and independent institutions, including INEC and judiciary, fix the infrastructural deficit. Nigeria will struggle to contain the endemic corruption holding sway in the country.
That's a hybrid, curtail and contain together.
Curtail, contain.
Tongue twisting. Hey,
and Veronica has the last one, but I guess we're totally out of time. Don't worry, Veronica. We'll certainly take it tomorrow. Thank you so much. Okay, I see it's already there being scrolled, and it's about, it says, I wish to request that you use your medium to once again enlighten Nigerians on how to hold government at all various levels accountable and not always having expectations only from the government at the center. For example, in terms of security, what should be citizens' expectations from local, state and federal government? On the economy and infrastructure, what should they expect from their states and local government? I actually make this request due to the fact that Nigerians rarely hold the grassroots government accountable, but all the agitation and protest is directed at the government at the center. I feel if people know who's responsible for what and channel their grievances appropriately, we will have better outcome and good governance instead of chanting Buhari must go at the slightest provocation. Well, I'm sure that the federal government will be happy to see this one, Veronica. Thank you so much for sending in your mails and comments. We'll take as many as we can as long as you continue to send them in. Thank you so much. I'm Malkwe Ogun Yusuf.
I'm Kayode Okikele.
I'm Ayo Makinde. Have a good day.
I'm Chamberlain, so see you next time.